Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been going through a rough patch lately. Lost my job about 3 months ago when the company downsized, and I've been living off my savings while job hunting. The stress has been eating away at me, so I decided to treat myself to something small today. Just a coffee and some time to read at my favorite little cafe downtown. It's one of those places where you can sit for hours without anyone bothering you, and honestly, it's become my escape from all the rejection emails and failed interviews. I got there around 2 in the afternoon, ordered my usual medium coffee, and grabbed the perfect spot by the big window facing the street. The afternoon light was just right, not too bright but enough to read by. I had my book, a mystery novel I've been meaning to finish for weeks, and for the first time in days I felt like I could actually relax. I've been sitting there for maybe 20 minutes, just getting into the story, when this woman approached my table. She was probably in her 40s, wearing expensive-looking clothes. She had this confident stride like she owned the place. She walked up to me and casually asked if I would mind moving because she liked this seat. I looked up from my book thinking she had to be joking. I mean, who just walks up to a stranger and asks them to move from their table? I let out a little laugh, waiting for her to smile or say she was kidding. I told her I thought she was joking for a second there, but she just stood there staring at me with this expectant look on her face. She wasn't kidding at all. She told me she wasn't joking and that she came here every Tuesday, and this was her usual spot. I looked around the cafe. There were at least 4 other empty tables, including one by another window that had almost the same view. The place wasn't even busy. I explained that I had just sat down and was planning to stay for a while, and pointed out that there were plenty of other seats available. Her face changed completely. The fake pleasant expression disappeared, replaced by this look of pure indignation, like I'd just slapped her or something. She asked me to excuse her tone and declared that she'd been coming here for 2 years and this was her table. I told her I didn't think that's how cafes work, explaining that it was first come, first served. She let out this dramatic sigh, the kind you'd expect from a teenager who just got told they couldn't go to a party. But this was a grown woman acting like a child. She said this whole situation was ridiculous and that she specifically came here at this time because she knew this table was usually available. I simply told her that today it wasn't available and apologized. She stood there for another moment, clearly expecting me to change my mind. When I went back to reading my book, she huffed and walked away. About 5 minutes later, she came back, but this time she had the cafe manager with her. He was a young guy, probably in his 20s, and he looked uncomfortable as hell. The manager apologized and asked if there was any way I'd be willing to move to another table. He explained that this lady said she was a regular customer and this was her usual spot. I looked at him and then at her. She was standing behind him with this smug expression, like she'd just won some kind of victory. I told him I was sorry, but I was there first and wasn't doing anything wrong by sitting at an empty table that was available when I got here. The manager said he understood but explained that she'd been coming there for years, and they tried to accommodate their regular customers when possible. Karen declared that she had told him so and that this was her table. The whole situation was getting more ridiculous by the minute. I could feel other customers starting to look over at us. This woman was making a scene over a cafe table. I told them that I was also a customer and had paid for my coffee just like everyone else. I made it clear I wasn't moving just because someone else wanted my seat. She said this was unacceptable and threatened to leave a terrible review online, claiming the place had the worst customer service she'd ever experienced. She was talking to the manager, but her voice was loud enough for half the cafe to hear. The manager looked like he wanted to disappear. He asked her to please keep her voice down, reminding her that they had other customers trying to enjoy their time there. She said she didn't care about the other customers and only cared about her seat. That's when another customer, an older gentleman who'd been sitting nearby, stood up and walked over. He said he couldn't help overhearing and asked if she was seriously making this much fuss over a table. She told him this didn't concern him. He said it actually did because her yelling was disturbing everyone in the cafe. and pointed out that I was there first while she was acting like a spoiled child. Her face turned red. She clearly wasn't used to being called out. She demanded to know how he dared speak to her that way, declaring that she was a paying customer. He pointed out that everyone else there was also a paying customer and that she wasn't special. More customers started paying attention now. A few were shaking their heads, clearly annoyed with her behavior. One woman was recording with her phone. The manager finally found his backbone. He told her he was going to have to ask her to lower her voice or leave because she was disturbing other customers. She said fine, that she'd never come back there again, and threatened to post about this on every review site she could find. She stormed out, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. The cafe went quiet for a moment, then slowly conversations resumed. The older gentleman who'd stood up for me came over. He apologized that I had to deal with that. I thanked him for backing me up and said I couldn't believe she was serious. The manager came over and apologized for the whole situation, offering to make my coffee on the house that day. The rest of my afternoon was peaceful. I finished 3 chapters of my book and actually felt relaxed for the first time in weeks. My husband died when my oldest daughter was 9 and my youngest was only 2. The youngest has absolutely no memories of her biological father. She was just too young. It took me 4 years to even think about dating again, and 7 more years before I remarried. By then my oldest was 16 and my youngest was 9. My new husband never tried to force himself into the role of father for my oldest daughter. He understood she had memories of her biological dad and respected that, but my youngest latched onto him immediately. She started calling him dad within a year of our marriage. To her, he was her father figure, the only one she really knew. This created a huge problem between my daughters. My oldest felt like her sister was betraying their biological father's memory. She couldn't understand how her sister could just replace him like that. Meanwhile, my youngest was confused about why she should mourn someone she didn't even remember when she had a loving father figure right there. The fights between them were constant. My oldest would make comments about how her sister was being disrespectful to their real dad. My youngest would fire back that her stepfather was more of a father to her than someone she never knew. I tried everything. Individual therapy for both girls, group therapy, family counseling. Nothing worked. If anything, therapy seemed to make my oldest more resentful. Things only got better when my oldest went off to college. The physical distance helped, and they managed to maintain a somewhat civil relationship when she came home for holidays. My youngest grew up, got a job, and built her own life. She's 24 now and has always been close with her stepfather, which brings us to last Saturday. My youngest had invited both of us over for dinner, and she seemed excited about something. We were all sitting around the table when she made her announcement. My youngest told us she had exciting news to share with everyone. She announced that she was getting married. My husband and I were thrilled and started congratulating her and asking all the usual questions about her fiancé and their plans. Then she dropped the bomb that set everything off. She looked right at my husband and asked if he would walk her down the aisle. She called him Dad when she asked. His face lit up. He was clearly honored and emotional about being asked. But I could see my oldest daughter's face changing. She went from surprised to angry in about 2 seconds. My oldest slammed her hand on the table and stood up. She asked if her sister was kidding and demanded to know why she wanted him to give her away instead of her actual father. My youngest responded that he was her actual father. She explained that he was the one who raised her and was there for every important moment in her life. She talked about how he taught her to ride a bike, helped with homework, and walked her to school. My oldest said that wasn't the point. She accused her sister of completely erasing their dad's memory and acting like he never existed. My youngest insisted she wasn't erasing anyone. She said she just didn't have memories of him like her sister did, and that the man sitting at our table was her father in every way that mattered. My oldest was getting more worked up by the second. She called her sister a horrible daughter and accused her of replacing their dad like he meant nothing. She asked how she could be so selfish. The room went completely silent. My youngest looked like she'd been slapped. My husband looked uncomfortable and like he wanted to disappear. I could see tears starting to form in my youngest's eyes. My youngest told her sister not to come to the wedding. She said she didn't want someone there who couldn't be happy for her. My oldest said fine and that she wouldn't want to watch this travesty anyway. She stormed out of the dining room. I could hear her grabbing her purse and slamming the front door. My youngest was crying and my husband was trying to comfort her while looking completely bewildered by the whole situation. I followed my oldest outside and caught her before she could drive away. I told her we needed to talk right then. She said there was nothing to talk about and that her sister had made her choice. I told her that no, she had made a choice. I explained that she chose to ruin her sister's engagement announcement because she couldn't handle the fact that her sister saw her stepfather as her dad. She insisted it was wrong and that her sister was betraying their dad's memory. I told her to listen to me very carefully. I explained that she was 27 years old and way too old to be throwing tantrums like this. I reminded her that her sister was 2 when their father died and that she didn't remember him. I said she had every right to see the man who actually raised her as her father. She asked what about their dad, and I told her that his memory wasn't threatened by this. I explained that we still talked about him, his ashes were still on our mantle, and we still celebrated his birthday. But I said her sister deserved to have her stepfather walk her down the aisle if that's what she wanted. My oldest started crying, but I wasn't done. I told her she needed to grow up and apologize to her sister. I said it was fine that she didn't see him as her father because nobody expected her to. But I told her she needed to get over the fact that her sister did. I reminded her that this was her sister's wedding, not hers. She started crying harder and told me this was all my fault. She said if I hadn't gotten remarried, none of this would have happened. That's when she got in her car and drove off. That was a week ago, and she hasn't responded to any of my texts or calls. I know she apologized to my youngest because my daughter told me, but she's still not talking to me. The funny thing is, my youngest's wedding is going to be beautiful. My husband is over the moon about walking her down the aisle. They've been planning together, and he's taking his role very seriously. He even asked if he could make a speech at the reception. My oldest is missing out on all of this because she can't let go of her anger. She's so focused on what she thinks should happen that she's missing what's actually happening. Her sister is happy and starting a new chapter in her life. I feel bad that my family is fractured like this, but I'm not apologizing for telling my oldest the truth. She needed to hear it, even if she didn't want to. I'm 17 and have a twin brother. We're identical twins, which becomes important later. We live with our mother, and she's always favored my brother over me. He's her golden child who can do no wrong, while I'm the one who gets blamed for everything. My brother has always been the troublemaker. He skips classes, doesn't do homework, and barely scrapes by in school. Meanwhile, I work hard to maintain good grades because I know education is my ticket out of this mess. Our mother has always made excuses for him, saying he's just going through a phase or that the teachers don't understand him. The situation that led to this disaster started when my brother was facing his final chemistry exam. This wasn't just any test. It was a make-or-break exam that would determine if he graduated or had to repeat the year. He had already failed 2 previous attempts, and this was his last chance. Instead of studying, he spent the weeks leading up to the exam playing video games and hanging out with his friends. 3 days before the exam, our mother sat us both down in the living room. I could tell she was stressed because she kept pacing back and forth. She told us we needed to talk about my brother's exam. When I asked what about it, she said he was going to fail, and that she knew he was going to fail. I told her maybe he should have studied then, but she warned me not to be smart with her and said she had a solution. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She wanted me to take the exam pretending to be my brother. Since we're identical twins, she figured no one would notice. She had it all planned out. I would show up with his student ID, take the test, and hopefully get him a passing grade. I asked her if she was insane and told her I wasn't doing that. She said I didn't have a choice because my brother needed to graduate. I explained that this was cheating and that I could get expelled or lose my scholarship opportunities. She dismissed my concerns and said my brother's future was more important right now. She was literally asking me to risk my entire academic future for my brother's laziness. When I refused again, she got angry and said if I wouldn't help my brother, then I could find somewhere else to live. I asked if she was kicking me out and she said she was giving me a choice: help my brother or find my own place. I was trapped. I had been working part-time at a grocery store, but I barely made enough to contribute to household expenses, let alone afford my own apartment. I had no relatives to stay with, and my few friends lived with their parents who wouldn't take in another teenager. Being kicked out would mean dropping out of school myself, which would destroy everything I had worked for. The next morning, she handed me my brother's backpack and student ID. She told me the exam was at 10 and not to mess this up. I said I couldn't believe she was making me do this, but she insisted she wasn't making me do anything and that I was choosing to help my family. The whole walk to school, I felt sick to my stomach. I knew this was wrong on so many levels. Not only was I committing academic fraud, but I was also enabling my brother's irresponsible behavior. But I felt like I had no choice. When I got to the school, I stood outside the main office for about 10 minutes, trying to work up the courage to go to the chemistry classroom. That's when I realized I couldn't go through with it. Even if it meant being homeless, I couldn't destroy my integrity like this. Instead of going to the exam room, I walked straight into the principal's office. The secretary tried to stop me, but I told her it was an emergency. The principal, a stern but fair man in his 50s, looked surprised to see me. He asked what he could do for me and said I should be in class. I told him I needed to report something and that my mother was trying to make me commit academic fraud. I explained the entire situation to him. I told him about the threats, the pressure, and how I was supposed to be taking my brother's exam at that very moment. He listened carefully, taking notes. He told me I had done the right thing coming to him and that this was a serious situation. I asked if I was going to get in trouble, and he assured me that I hadn't done anything wrong and that I had shown remarkable integrity by coming forward. He promised me that I wouldn't face any repercussions for my mother's scheme. Then he called security to escort me home while he handled the situation. What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. The principal contacted my brother's teachers and discovered he had been cheating in other ways too. They found evidence of copied homework and suspected he had cheated on previous exams. My brother was expelled that afternoon. When the principal called our mother to tell her about the expulsion, she went ballistic. She showed up at the school screaming about unfair treatment and demanding to know how they found out about the plan. The principal explained that they had received credible information about attempted academic fraud, but it didn't stop there. Because the situation involved a minor being threatened with homelessness for refusing to commit fraud, the principal was required to report it to Child Protective Services. 2 days later, a social worker showed up at our house. Our mother had to explain why she had threatened to kick out her 17-year-old son for refusing to cheat. The social worker was not impressed. She opened a case file and started making regular visits to check on the home environment. Our mother was furious but had to cooperate or risk losing custody of both of us. Then came the legal results. The school district decided to press charges for attempted academic fraud. The police showed up at our house with a warrant, and our mother was arrested. She spent a night in jail before being released on bail. The court case was a nightmare for her. She had to hire a lawyer she couldn't afford, pay court fees, and do community service. She also had to attend parenting classes as part of her sentence. The judge made it clear that threatening to make a minor homeless for refusing to commit crimes was completely unacceptable. Throughout this entire ordeal, our mother never suspected that I had voluntarily gone to the principal. She assumed I had been caught somehow or that someone had seen me with my brother's ID. To this day, she believes I tried to go through with her plan but got discovered. My brother had to repeat his senior year at a different school, and the expulsion is permanently on his record. He is struggling to get into any decent college now. Our mother still treats him like the golden child, but she is much more careful about her schemes now that she has Child Protective Services watching her. As for me, I'm doing better than ever. The principal wrote me a letter of recommendation highlighting my integrity and moral courage. That letter, along with my good grades, helped me get a full scholarship to a state university. I'll be moving out for college in a few months, finally free from this toxic environment. My brother and mother are still dealing with the results of their choices while I'm moving forward with my life on my own terms. For about 3 years now, I've worked as a supervisor for a blood bank. People come out to donate blood, and we make sure everything goes smoothly and safely. The job has its challenges, but I genuinely like helping people and knowing that what we collect could save lives. The Food and Drug Administration has really strict rules about blood collection. Temperature control is huge. If it gets too hot in the collection area, bacteria can grow in the blood, and donors might faint or get sick. There's a specific temperature threshold we absolutely cannot exceed. No exceptions. I've always been careful about following these rules because people's safety depends on it. So there I was on what was supposed to be a routine Tuesday morning, loading up all our equipment into the van. My team and I were heading to a community center about an hour away for a blood drive. It was already getting warm when we left, and the weather forecast said it would hit the mid-90s that day. Not ideal, but manageable if the building had good air conditioning. When we got to the community center, I immediately noticed how stuffy it felt inside. I asked the facility manager about the air conditioning. He apologized and explained that their heating and cooling system had broken down the day before. They were waiting for a repair technician, but he couldn't make it out until the following week. I pulled out our quality control thermometer and checked the temperature in the area where we were supposed to set up the blood collection stations. It was already approaching the maximum allowed temperature, and the day was just getting started. I called our manager right away. Her name was Karen, and she'd been with the company for about 10 years. She had a reputation for being pretty demanding and not understanding when field issues came up. I explained the situation to Karen, telling her that the community center's air conditioning was broken and the temperature was already getting close to the cut-off limit. I suggested we cancel and reschedule the blood drive. She immediately rejected the idea and accused me of just trying to get out of work. I tried to explain that we had driven all the way out there and loaded all the equipment, so I wasn't trying to avoid work. I told her I was genuinely concerned about donor safety and Food and Drug Administration compliance. She dismissed my concerns and said she didn't want to hear excuses, demanding that we just do the blood drive. I warned her that the temperature regulations existed for a reason, and if we proceeded with the drive while the temperature was over the limit, I would have to quarantine all the blood units. This meant everything we collected would be thrown away. She called me dramatic and said she was driving out to see for herself before hanging up on me. I looked at my team and they could see the frustration on my face. We'd worked together long enough that they knew when Karen was being unreasonable. About 45 minutes later, Karen's car pulled up outside the community center. She walked in with her clipboard and thermometer, clearly annoyed. By this point, the temperature had risen even more, and it was definitely over the acceptable limit. Karen took the thermometer and walked around the room for a minute. Then she did something that made my jaw drop. She walked over to a window where there was a small fan running and held the thermometer directly in front of it. After watching the temperature drop, she declared that the temperature was fine. I pointed out that the measurement needed to be taken in the actual collection area, not by a window with a fan. She insisted the temperature was within range and ordered us to set up the rest of the site and continue with the blood drive. I tried to explain that the Food and Drug Administration required us to measure the temperature in the collection area itself, not in the coolest spot we could find. She repeated that the temperature was fine and told us we all needed to stay and do our job. She turned around and walked back to her car without another word. I watched her drive away, leaving us with a completely unsafe situation. My team looked at me expectantly. I knew what I had to do, even though it was going to create a huge mess. I told everyone we would set up the blood drive, but I wanted them to know that I was going to have to quarantine every single unit we collected that day. One of my team members asked if I was sure about that decision. I said I was positive. The temperature was already over the limit, and it was only going to get hotter. I wasn't going to risk donor safety or violate Food and Drug Administration regulations just because Karen wanted to meet her quota. We spent the entire day collecting blood donations. The temperature kept climbing, and by afternoon it was sweltering in that community center. Donors were sweating, some were feeling dizzy, and it was exactly the kind of situation the regulations were designed to prevent. After each unit of blood was collected, I followed the standard operating procedure and quarantined it, filling out all the necessary paperwork. By the end of the day, we had collected about 30 units of blood, and every single one went into the quarantine cooler. The donors had no idea what was happening. They came in excited to help save lives, spent their time giving blood, and left feeling good about their contribution. They had no clue that their donations were going to be thrown away because of Karen's stubbornness. When we got back to the blood bank that evening, I handed off the coolers of quarantined blood to the lab technicians. They looked surprised and asked if I had really quarantined an entire blood drive. I said yes due to temperature violations. The lab tech mentioned that it was going to be a lot of paperwork. The next morning I was called into the site director's office. I figured I was about to get fired, or at least written up for quarantining everything. But when I sat down, she looked more confused than angry. The site director said she was trying to understand what happened the previous day. She asked if something had gone wrong at the blood drive that caused every unit to be quarantined. And I explained that the community center's air conditioning was broken and the temperature in the collection area exceeded Food and Drug Administration limits. I told her I had told Karen about the situation and recommended canceling, but she insisted we proceed. The site director asked if Karen was okay with me quarantining everything. I explained that she didn't seem to understand that would be the result. I described how she had measured the temperature by a window fan and said it was fine, even though that wasn't where the measurement was supposed to be taken. The site director's expression changed from confusion to anger, but not at me. She asked if we had wasted 10 hours of staff time, travel expenses, medical equipment, and volunteer donations because Karen wouldn't follow protocol. I said that was correct. I'm not sure exactly what conversation the site director had with Karen after that, but I know it wasn't pleasant. Karen managed to keep her job for a few more weeks, but she was eventually fired. Word got around that she had cost the company thousands of dollars and wasted dozens of people's time because she refused to follow basic safety regulations. After my dad passed away 2 years ago, my mom couldn't handle the mortgage payments on her own. She's been struggling with arthritis and can barely work part-time at the local library. My younger brother just started college, and even with his scholarship, we needed help with his living expenses. So I picked up every shift I could find. Mornings at the hardware store, afternoons at Brew and Bean Cafe, and evenings stocking shelves at the grocery store. It's exhausting, but we're keeping our heads above water. The cafe job is actually my favorite because I like making coffee, and most customers are pretty decent. That changed last Tuesday. I was working my usual afternoon shift when this woman in her 50s walked in. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and was wearing what looked like expensive jewelry. She walked up to the counter with this air of superiority that immediately put me on edge. She told me she wanted her usual order. I apologized and asked her what that was. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her entire family tree. Her eyes narrowed and she crossed her arms. She said I should know by now and that I'd worked here long enough. She asked if I didn't think it was time I learned what her order was. I felt my patience starting to wear thin, but I kept my voice calm and professional. I told her that I worked 3 jobs and served dozens of customers every week. I asked if she honestly thought I could remember what one person ordered. She said I should remember hers specifically. She said it like she was some kind of celebrity or something. I just stood there waiting for her to actually tell me what she wanted. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Other customers were starting to line up behind her, and I could feel them getting impatient. Finally, she huffed dramatically and rolled her eyes. She told me she wanted a large vanilla latte with oat milk, extra hot, 2 shots of espresso, and a pump of caramel syrup. She added that she wanted it made properly this time. This time? I'd never seen this woman before in my life, but I wasn't about to argue. I started making her drink, being extra careful to get everything right. When I worked, she kept making snide comments. She complained that she couldn't believe they hired people who didn't even know their regular customers. She said this was exactly what was wrong with customer service these days. She claimed no one took pride in their work anymore. The other customers were starting to look uncomfortable. One older gentleman behind her was shaking his head in disbelief. I finished her drink and set it on the counter. I told her the total was $6.50. She said it was $6.25 last week. I explained that prices went up and pointed to the clearly visible price update notice that had been posted for 3 weeks. She looked at it like it had personally offended her. She said it was ridiculous and that she'd been coming here for months while we kept raising prices. She demanded to speak to my manager. My manager was in the back doing inventory, but I called him over. He's this really calm guy in his 30s who's always been fair with us employees. He asked what the problem was. She told him that I didn't know regular customers and that we were now charging her more than usual. She demanded a discount for the inconvenience. My manager apologized but explained that our prices were clearly posted and we couldn't give discounts for that reason. He said that regarding remembering orders, we served hundreds of customers and couldn't memorize everyone's preferences. She said this was unacceptable and that she was a loyal customer who deserved better treatment. My manager asked how often she came in. She said at least once a week. He asked if she always ordered the same thing. She said yes, obviously. My manager looked at me, then back at her. He explained that we had a loyalty program where she could save her usual order on our app. He offered to help her set it up. She said she shouldn't have to use some stupid app and that employees should just remember her order. The gentleman behind her finally spoke up. He told her to just pay for her coffee and let the rest of them order. He said these kids were doing their best. She told him this didn't concern him. He said it did when she was holding up the line with her attitude. More customers started agreeing with him. I could see her getting flustered when she realized she wasn't getting the support she expected. She said fine, but that she was never coming back here again. She threw exact change on the counter and stormed out with her drink, nearly knocking over a chair on her way out. The older gentleman stepped up to order next. He said he'd have whatever was easiest to make and told me not to worry about her. He explained that some people just can't handle not being the center of attention. The rest of my shift went smoothly and several customers made a point to be extra nice, probably because they'd witnessed the scene. My manager even told me I handled it well. The next week she came back. She walked right up to the counter like nothing had happened. She told me she wanted her usual. I looked at her for a long moment, then pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app where I'd started keeping track of difficult customers after her last visit. I asked if she meant the large vanilla latte with oat milk, extra hot, 2 shots of espresso, and a pump of caramel syrup. Her face went completely red. She'd been caught in her own lie about being a regular customer that I should remember. She stammered that yes, that was right. I told her it was coming right up. She paid without another word and left quickly. I haven't seen her since, and honestly, I hope it stays that way. The other staff members got a good laugh out of it when I told them how I'd started keeping notes on problem customers. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.